All right. Well, good afternoon. Glad to see you all out on a nice rainy day here. And some of you, I know a lot of you have been to my presentations before. Can you just raise your hand so I know who the new people are? Actually, new people, raise your hand if you've never come and seen me. Okay, good. So I got some new people here. Then I usually don't have this in the way. I don't like to use a podium and notes and things. I like to use my brain. But today I'm going to be doing a little different. I'm going to be doing on General Washington's Continental Army A-Team. Remember the show, the A-Team? There was a man on there named B.A., right? Well, this is the original B.A., Benedict Arnold. Now, I'm not going to be giving a life story of Benedict Arnold from his birth. And where was he born? Does anyone know? Know what state? Know what country? Okay, what state? I thought somebody said Connecticut. Okay, Connecticut. Norwich, Connecticut. And I'm not going to go to his death in 1801. And where did he die? Where?
France or England.
England, yeah, London, yeah. I'm going to concentrate on one single year during the American Revolution where the battles of Saratoga took place. So that would be a year 1777, right? And what's that year known as? The year of the hangman. Because it has the 777, they look like gallows. So they call that the year of the hangman. And I'm going to be doing this through a series of different letters written by Arnold, George Washington, John Hancock, and some other folks you may or may not have heard of. And I have some photographs, yeah, right, photographs, Matthew Brady in the Revolutionary War, right? I have some artist renditions of some of the men we're going to be speaking of here. So when I get to someone and you might not be familiar with who they are or put a face to the name, most of them are up here, and I'll point up here. But like I said, I hate this thing. I was hoping to have a smaller little podium, but I've got to use this because I'm going to be reading letters, and I can't remember all these letters. I want to get them written because, remember, 250 years ago, they spoke a little bit more of the king's or the queen's English, right? Wasn't like our vernacular of today. The spelling was different. So when you read these letters, they're like, boy, they don't know how to spell. But that was how the English wrote. It was different than 250 years on here. So there was a lot of no telegraph, no internet. I don't know how you survived without texting in 1777, but they did. So to get correspondences to places, what did they do? They wrote letters, a lot of letters. And Arnold had been writing letters since 1775 to his superiors about his zeal and his patriotism to his country. Now, before anybody shoots me here, I know I've got 2 American flags up here, right? And I have them the right way. Anybody a veteran here? Pretty sure I have the blue field on the left. Is that correct? And they're smaller. I realize that. But then in the center, see what I've got. See, I knew it. What does that flag represent? Which consists of who? You have what? 4 countries, right? England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. So my size of flag doesn't matter. That's not the reason, but that was a flag that I found actually somebody threw away. And I said, I'm not going to throw away. I've got to use that. So I'll get a 3x5 American flag to compete with that soon. Don't worry. But Benedict Arnold wanted to write people, his superiors, about his zeal for his country. And in his letters, I'm going to accentuate a certain word and talk about what he thought about his country. We'll do a little bit of a background here. Battle of Valcour Island. Heard of that? Battle of Valcour Island in what lake? Lake Champlain, October 11th. I remember that because it's my wife's birthday. 1776. Now that's the fall of 76. So what's coming after fall?
Winter.
Winter never fails if you live in New York. Might come in October, who knows? So when the British were coming down, and they were going to attack Albany, and they were going to try and get to New York City. But it was too late in the year. So there was this battle that Benedict Arnold had built ships in a place called Skenesborough. You've been there, right? No? Somebody else. It's Skenesborough at the time, and it was called that because of the Skene family. Now it's called Whitehall, New York. So if you go up near Fort Edward, Fort Anne, in that area, there's a town called Whitehall. He actually built these ships. Got him on Lake Champlain, and when the British came down, that was the first, they say that was the birth of the United States Navy, that battle. And a lot of people give Benedict Arnold credit, a lot of authors, and I have some books up here. Some are correct, not that I'm an expert, but I know some who are. some of the things that are written are not exactly true, that Benedict Arnold was the one who turned back the British because he fought them at the Battle of Valcour Island. He may have slowed them up for a day or two, but really it was because of the weather. Winter was coming. There was no way in October 11th they could have made it down, attack a city or two, and who knows what they're going to encounter between there, Albany and New York, and make it all the way back to where?
Quebec.
Not England, right? Quebec. Quebec was a huge British loyalist stronghold. That's where they came out of when they attacked New York. So they knew they were running out of time. So they decided, never mind, we went back up to Canada. But a lot of people attribute Benedict Arnold for being the one. He did slow them up, but it wasn't the main reason. They had no chance of taking Fort Ticonderoga. So at the end of 76, Washington sent Benedict Arnold to the biggest state in the Union, right? Rhode Island, to defend Providence. And at this time, he started corresponding with Washington. Now, at the same time here in early of 77, February, Congress passed an important resolution. Now, this resolution kicked off a huge firestorm that was all the rest of these letters I'm going to read because of this letter, that was this resolution that was made by the Continental Congress. And the Continental Congress passed this resolution saying, resolved that in voting for general officers, a due regard shall be had to the line of succession, the merit of the persons proposed, and the quota of troops raised and to be raised by each state, resolved that 5 major generals be appointed. All right, so you have General Washington, right? The commanding general. Then you have these 5 major generals that they're basing on the population of the state they are from. And the 5 men, I want to see if you know some name missing here. There's 5 men, and some of them are on this board, not all of them, because there weren't paintings done of them. There was Lord Stirling, Thomas Mifflin, Arthur St. Clair is up there. You'll hear more about him later. Adam Stevens, and Benjamin Lincoln. And he's up here too, because he figured into the Battle of Bennington quite prominently, along with him and John Stark kind of butted heads a little bit according to the Battle of Bennington. Now, who's missing from that at this point? Benedict Arnold. So Washington had seen this resolution, and he wrote to Arnold just a couple of weeks later, March 3rd, 77. See, I'm going in chronological order here. We're going to go all the way to the end of 77. Washington says, and I quote, "We have lately had several promotions to the rank of Major General. I am at a loss whether you have been omitted through some mistake. Should that be the case, I beg you will not take any hasty steps in consequence of it. My endeavors to make remedy of any error that you may have been made will not be wanting." So he's hoping Benedict Arnold doesn't take any hasty steps in consequence of this. I guess he doesn't know him very well at this point. Washington then, 3 days later on March 6, writes to Richard Henry Lee, one of his subordinates. He says, "I am anxious to know whether General Arnold's non-promotion was owing to accident or design. Aha. And the cause of it. Surely a more active, a more spirited and sensible officer fills no department in your army. Not seeing him then on the list of major generals and no mention made of him has given me uneasiness." So right off the bat here we have that Benedict Arnold is loved by who? General George Washington, right? The father of our country, first president. Man with false teeth. Did you know what kind of teeth he had?
Rhinoceros bone or something, wasn't it?
What's that?
Rhinoceros bone
What's that?
for his teeth.
What kind of bone?
Rhinoceros?
Oh, right. Oh, you know what I was told, though, by an expert? That they were actually other human teeth. There were no wooden teeth. There were no cows. There were actual other human teeth that made up his... But now, that's what I was told. But anyway, but you know what why in a dollar bill, right? He don't look too happy because they actually did have to pack his mouth with cotton and to fill out. So the father of our country, George Washington, love him, hate him, whichever, he loved Benedict Arnold at this point. Why is he not on this list? And it wasn't just the Battle of Valcour Island. Remember Quebec City? Speaking of which, some of you have already got them. I have some magazines over here. Hallowed Ground. If you're a family, just take one, please, because I don't think I have enough. Talks about the different things that took place during the winter in the Revolutionary War in the early months. Talks about the taking of Quebec City, or the attempt to take Quebec City, which Benedict Arnold was part of. Talks about the taking of the cannons from Ticonderoga, Henry Knox, his noble train of artillery, taking them from Ticonderoga all the way down to Boston. And there were some other things Arnold was involved in before this. So Washington was familiar with his zeal, his tenacity. He's able to lead men in the field, men on command. You talk a lot about the Civil War, right? Who was the guy that was part of the Union who Lincoln did not like at all? He was the commanding general at the Battle of Antietam. McClellan. George Brenton McClellan, right? He's the one that made the Army of the Potomac a cohesive unit that marched, that fought, that went and went, but Lincoln did not like him, but the men loved him. So it was after the Battle of Antietam he was relieved because Lincoln told him, hey, if you're not going to use your army, can you mind if I borrow it? Because he had all these troops against Lee. He was like 3-1 odds, and he never engaged all of his troops at once. He could have won the battle that day, the Antietam battle. The war would have been basically over with in 62. But he was like Benedict Arnold McClellan was. His men loved him. They followed him anywhere, even though Washington loved Arnold. There was a lot of other leaders who did not like Arnold. And he's gone down in history as what? Traitor. You think of a traitor. Now, that didn't happen until 3 years later in 1780. So you got these 3 years now. Benedict Arnold's fought at the Battle of Quebec City, Valcour Island. Now we're coming upon 77. These promotions have been given. He's not on the list. Washington is the commanding general of the Continental Army. He's like, what's going on here? Was this a mistake? Was it by design? You don't like the guy? Who cares if you like the guy, right? He's a great general. He leads his men. What's the idea of the war? To like people? What's the reason? You want to win. You want your men to win the battle. You want to beat the British, beat the Germans. So why is he not on this list? Well, Arnold responds to General Washington, says, I'm greatly obliged to your excellency. And I got a book here, and you think, whoa, excellency, wait a minute, isn't there this thing in 1776, right? No kings. We don't like King George. We want a government of our own. We want a president, a leader. You know what? They wanted to set up the Newburgh Conspiracy. Anybody ever hear of the Newburgh Conspiracy near the end of the war? Lincoln, I'm on the Civil War here. Washington had his men in Newburgh on the Hudson River at the cantonment there. And there were some leaders who wanted to conspire. They wanted to set him up as king. He didn't want to have any of that. I'm not a king. I'm a leader. But there's a book, so it's called His Excellency. And that was just a way of saying, like when you signed a document during the Revolutionary War and later in the Civil War, your obedient servant. It was a way of showing respect to your leader, your excellency. It wasn't saying, oh, King George, we got a new King George now that lives in Mount Vernon. But no. So His Excellency is how Benedict Arnold and the other men respected him, and they called him. So he says, I'm greatly obliged to your excellency for interesting yourself so much in my behalf. Congress have doubtless a right of promoting those who from their ability, their long and arduous services, they esteem most deserving. Because remember, the Continental Congress promoted Washington. Even though he was the commander, he could not promote anyone. He might recommend, he might say, hey, look at this guy's done, but he could not promote personally, hey, I'm promoting him. Like today you can do that. Generals can promote someone on the field. Hey, you've shown great bravery in serving. Okay, you've got a battlefield promotion. He could not do that. Congress, by the way, who was the president of Congress at this time?
Thomas Jefferson.
His picture's up here, and I think it's funny. The guy that signed the Declaration of Independence, the biggest. His picture is up here, an artist rendering, and this is what he looked like. And I thought, man, doesn't look like what I envisioned him looking like. So when you get afterwards, come up and take a peek at what John Hancock painted looks like. So he was the man in charge of the Continental Congress, and I have a couple of letters by him as well. But he says they're promoting junior officers to the rank of major generals. I view as a very civil way of requesting my resignation. So he's saying, okay, this is why they're trying to get me out. They were promoting these junior generals who, have you ever heard any of these guys? They never went, Lincoln and St. Clair, the only two that really ever did anything else during the war. The other three were, I don't say nobody, but they were lost to history. They didn't lead troops. They didn't do. So he's saying these junior officers have been raised above me because they're trying to get me to resign. He says, when I entered the service, now I want you to listen to this vernacular he talks about in these letters, going for quite a bit here, and then I'll let you know when it turns. He says, when I entered the service of my country, my character was impeached. I have sacrificed my interest, ease, and happiness in her cause. Every personal injury shall be buried in my zeal for the safety and happiness of my country, in whose cause I have repeatedly fought and bled. I am ready at all times to risk my life. Here's one of those risk, R-I-S-Q-U-E. We don't spell it that way, that's old French. I shall continuously and cautiously avoid any hasty step that may tend to injure my country. Now you're thinking, wait a minute here. This is March of 77. What has he bled? Has he been injured in a battle before? Remember what happened at Quebec City? What happened? Got shot in his leg, shot in his left leg, pretty bad. I mean, he's way up in Quebec. I mean, he's up. When he went to Quebec, they went up through Maine and up across in the winter with all these troops. It was horrific getting there. Then you get to this fortified city, Quebec City. If anybody's ever been there, there's pictures in the hollowed ground there. It's on a hill. You got to go up the hill to get this fort. And they made it. But there was a lot of casualties, a lot of killing, and he was shot in his left leg. So he has spilled his blood for his country, sacrificed for his country. My country, take note of that, he says numerous times, my country. And if you're wondering, why the heck did Congress not promote Benedict Arnold? That's a great question, right? And I think it's best expressed in this letter from Eldridge Gerry. You've heard of him, right? He was a member of Congress. See, a lot of these men you've never heard of that were congressmen, part of the First Continental Congress. And he writes Congressman Joseph Trumbull. He says, I quote, with respect to General Arnold, he is considered by Congress as a brave and deserving officer and had been possible to have proceeded in the line of succession in appointing officers would undoubtedly have been promoted. Now here comes the reason. This cannot be done without giving great dissatisfaction to the states that had no officers in the army at the beginning of the war, who claim a right to their proportion agreeable to the number of men which they furnish for service, of major and brigadier generals. Now what Jerry's basically saying is that Connecticut already had too many generals. They went by the state you're in. They already had 2. Some states don't have any brigadier generals, and for Connecticut to now put another one, a third one, that wouldn't have been acceptable. These other states would have protested. That's what he's saying here. So while Benedict Arnold was a general in the army, the problem is he couldn't get promoted because he was from Connecticut. It's not because of it was where he was from. That's what it comes down to, because Connecticut already has enough. Generals Rufus Putnam and Joseph Spencer. You've heard of those guys? Never heard of old Joseph Putnam? There's another Putnam you might have heard of, Israel Putnam. Old Put. But Joseph Putnam and Joseph Spencer, right? 2 guys, never heard of. What'd they do for, nothing. Nothing of any significance. So, too many generals from Connecticut. That's why Benedict Arnold was not promoted. Now, Benedict Arnold was granted leave from Rhode Island, and he went home to Connecticut in the spring of '77. He was in New Haven. Now, his house stood until the early 20th century. You can't go there now. You can, but guess what's there now? Not a Walmart. It's a parking lot. And not that you can save every historic house, but there are photographs of it because it was into the time of photography that his house was photographed, so you can see what it looked like, but it's not there now. There's a marker saying Benedict Arnold's house. So while he was there in April '77, the British launched an attack on Connecticut. Wow, you ever hear of that? Wasn't anything huge. What they did was this. They took a fleet of vessels and they landed in Newfield County. And these troops made basically beeline to Danbury in Fairfield County, another county. Well, what were they looking for? Remember in those days they had militias that had stores of ammunition, guns, powder, cannon, anything they could use to fight. And the British knew about this. So they raided this area, hearing this was huge. This is why they went to Bennington. The Battle of Bennington took place. They were heading to Bennington to get the arsenal and the stuff there, and never made it. That's the Battle of Bennington, which took place in New York State. So a lot of these battles were because either we need the ammunition for ourselves or we just don't want you to have it. So they're going here. Now, the British command was of Major General William Tryon, the royal governor of the colony of New York. You've heard of Tryon before? If you do any searching in Revolutionary history, it's Tryon County, right? Tryon County was a huge county in New York, named after him. Now it's about 8 different counties broken up. But during that time, a Tryon County militia was huge at the Battle of Oriskany. General Nicholas Herkimer and the Tryon County militia. Tryon County was a huge county. It was like a third of the state at that time. So that's named after this guy. And they wanted to burn and plunder and decimate much of Fairfield and Danbury. So in late April, they mounted the expedition. So Danbury was pretty much burnt down. And the British then descended to Ridgefield. So this is where you get the Battle of Ridgefield. And then the 27th of April. Now Benedict Arnold was there, and although he had no actual command, he was on leave from New Haven, but he wouldn't sit by and let this occur. So he went out there and he participated in the defense of Connecticut. the Battle of Ridgefield, not Richfield, Ridgefield, Ridge. And here he is. First time here, he has a horse shot out from underneath him. The horse falls on him, but he's not hurt. He showed remarkable bravery in this fight, like he did at the taking of Ticonderoga, like he did in the Battle of Quebec City, like he did in the Battle of Valcour Island. Once again, Benedict Arnold puts his life on the line in the midst of enemy fire and attempts to save his country, but as he puts it, his country. Now, the British flee from there. They leave Ridgefield. They leave there. So in reaction to this, Congress, I don't have a picture. There's a picture up here. It's a fanciful picture somewhere. Yeah, right here. Fanciful painting of the Battle of Ridgefield. It has Benedict Arnold on his horse, laying on the ground. The horse is on the ground. He's got a gun in one hand and a sword in the other, and he's 12 feet away from the British, and he's beating them off. Not what happened, but they did. Fanciful. But in reaction, Congress was so impressed that on May the 2nd, we're getting closer here, which was a few days later, they passed a resolution saying, resolved, that a major general be appointed in the Army of the United States. The ballot being taken, Brigadier General Benedict Arnold was promoted to the rank of Major General. John Hancock, remember we talked about him, the President of the Continental Congress, the next day wrote George Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, and says, the conduct of General Arnold on the late expedition against the town of Danbury being highly approved by Congress, they have promoted him to the rank of Major General. Yay, Washington's happy. All right, about time. These guys got promoted February 19th. Now it's May 2nd. He finally got promoted to Major General. Everything's going to be great. But if you're wondering what the condition might have looked like, there this is. In fact, the photograph of the original commission is up here. Dated May 2nd, 1777, about his promotion. It's signed by Congress, by John Hancock. He has John Hancock's on the bottom of it, see? And it survives, one of the few documents that really survives to this day. But George Washington receives this notification, and he writes back to John Hancock saying, I find he, Arnold, does not consider the promotion Congress has been pleased to confer upon him sufficient to obliterate the neglect arising from their having omitted him in their late appointments of major generals. He observes that he is subjected to be commanded by those who had been inferior to him. He further adds that Congress in their last resolve respecting him have acknowledged to the station of Major General and therefore have done away every objection implied by their former omission. Now I got to say, that sounds kind of right, doesn't it? He's now the rank of Major General, but those 5 others who were promoted above him on February 19th outrank him because they have seniority over him. And if the big problem was that Connecticut had too many generals a few months earlier, what is why now all of a sudden can they promote him? Congress says it's okay now. So now we're talking about the middle of the summer, middle of July 77. Arnold goes down to Connecticut. Or not to Connecticut, Philadelphia. Washington sends him to Connecticut, or Philadelphia, and he has to deal with some settling accounts down there and things. So while he's in Philadelphia, Benedict Arnold has his portrait done. And there's numerous pictures of it around here, and this is it right here. I'll show you, this is it right here. It's not in color. It was a wood, this picture right here was done, and it's one of a few. You go on and look up Benedict Arnold online for photographs or images. You'll get about 50 different ones, and only about 3 are actually correct. That's one of them. This one that's on the cover of this book, too, is another one that's very accurate as to what he really looked like. So he has that done by a French painter, a French artist. Good thing. Pierre-Eugène de Semité. Now, on that painting, you can barely see it, but as I was talking about earlier, somebody asked what this was. Anyone know what this is called? A lot of the generals, officers in the Revolutionary War on both sides wore these. It's a gorget. It was a symbol, came from the medieval times when they had the suit of armor. They'd have protection from, plating, like the shoulder and the neck. And it became you see this, it must be an officer of some rank. This is before they had the epaulettes or any kind of identification as to what rank you were. But there was a kind of ranking that was done before that. And then you'll see on this picture here of Benedict Arnold, you can see underneath, but really you can see it good on George Washington here. They had a sash that they would wear above their waistcoat, their vest, and below their greatcoat, and it was called a sash. But only one had the blue. George Washington, that was the commander of the whole army. Benedict Arnold had one. His was purple. So he was a brigadier general. So that denoted rank, and he wore it for this painting. It was actually called a riband, which is where we get our word ribbon from. But again, he's not happy about this seniority built in, something he's going to have to work toward. But at least for now, he's got the rank. He's got the rank of Major General. So Henry Lawrence, writing to John Rutledge. Now, Henry Lawrence is another member of Congress I'm sure you've heard of. Who didn't vote, by the way, but not every member of Congress is always voting. They voted by whoever was there at the time on these things. And he writes, in August, a late determination in Congress relative to the rank of a good old servant, General Arnold, will probably deprive us, that officer, and may be attended by further ill effects in the army. The reasoning upon this occasion was disgusting. He was refused not because he was deficient in merits or that his demand is not well founded, but because he asked for it. And that granting at such instance would be a derogatory to the honor of Congress. So that's the reason. Ultimately, another member of Congress wrote that denying Benedict Arnold's promotion was a victory for Republican ideals and a denouncement of system of monarchy. Basically, the concept was this was for the greater good of the nation for Congress that Arnold didn't get the promotion rather than the benefit of one man, Benedict Arnold himself. So at the same time this is going on, the Northern Army under the command of Philip Schuyler. Northern Command means basically New York State. This is Philip Schuyler here, Schuylerville, New York. It's named after him. Schuyler is in command of the Northern Army. And he is retreated from Moses Creek all the way down to Stillwater. You've heard of Stillwater, right? If you've been to the Saratoga battlefield, that's where it is, in the town of Stillwater. It's right along the Hudson River. And he was determined by mid-August to relieve the siege at Fort Stanwix. Actually, it was Fort Schuyler at that time. Fort Stanwix currently is a National Historic Site located in Rome, New York. How many? I know some of you have been there, right? Okay. So Schuyler ordered Brigadier General Ebenezer Learned and his brigade to march out to the Mohawk Valley and gather all the Continental forces he could and the militia with them, and then make an effort to lift the siege at Fort Schuyler. Benedict Arnold, informed of Congress's voting down his promotion, went to Philip Schuyler and asked if he could command the expedition in the Mohawk Valley. Philip Schuyler responded by saying, "It gives me great satisfaction that you have offered to go and conduct the military operations in Tryon County. You will please to repair thither with all the convenience, speak, and take upon you the command of all the Continental troops and all such militia." Now, you'll find in a lot of histories, too, that it was that Philip Schuyler went to Benedict Arnold and asked him to lead this. But really, he wanted Learned to do it. But Arnold thought, I want to lead this. He wasn't ordered to go. Arnold asked that he could take command of the expedition, for which Schuyler was, of course, thrilled. But that wasn't Schuyler's original intent. Because the command of forces down the Mohawk Valley were far less than the command of a major general of the Continental Army. Now we're talking about little Mohawk Valley, New York here. But Learned was supposed to do it. But again, Arnold wants to fight for his country. Doesn't care where. And if we hadn't gone, who knows what would have happened. Now, he's talking about little Mohawk Valley here. But what's going to happen here in September and October of 1777 became worldwide importance. So there's a new and great important opportunity, and he's going to get permission from Philip Schuyler to do it. Arnold is in the Northern Army in the beginning of August. He begins to write his old pal, Horatio Gates. You've heard of Horatio Gates? And if you know anything about Benedict Arnold's biography or know about the story of Arnold in this Northern campaign, you're going to hear about thinking, old friend, what are you being sarcastic here, his old pal? Benedict Arnold and Horatio Gates were friends earlier on in the war. In 76, they worked together at Ticonderoga and Lake Champlain. They developed a very strong friendship relative to the nature of their working relationship in the command of the Northern Army. And in fact, Arnold considered Gates to be one of his patrons, like Philip Schuyler, one of his closest confidants, just like George Washington. And so in the August of 77, Arnold begins to pick up his correspondence again, which he had been lax with Horatio Gates on. And he writes him and says, on August the 5th, no public or private entry or insult shall prevail on me to forsake the cause of my injured and oppressed country until I see peace, liberty, and restored to her, or nobly die in the attempt. Arnold wrote this to Gates when he was very concerned that the upcoming vote in Congress might not go his way. He writes Horatio Gates again, while in the Mohawk Valley on his way to lift the siege at Schuyler, and he says to Gates, I am happy to hear that you are well and have joined the army. Now he's referring because Philip Schuyler has been relieved of his command because something happened during the Saratoga campaign. The British were coming down, they got to Ticonderoga, and there were hardly anybody there. Philip Schuyler was there in command, and Arthur St. Clair, who I talked about earlier, was second in command. And they didn't put up a fight, they didn't do anything. They just basically let the British take the Fort Ticonderoga. So Congress looked at this as like, wait a minute, whose side are you on here? They didn't kick him out of the army, they didn't get rid of him, they just basically took his command away from him and gave it to Horatio Gates. Well, Philip Schuyler's staff was still in there, so Benedict Arnold inherited them. He had a lot of aides and secretaries and things like this that were under him that were formerly under Philip Schuyler, and Gates and Schuyler did not like each other. So this is where a little rift begins to develop between Gates and Arnold here, because now you've got Philip Schuyler's men with you. What are they saying about me? Are they going to side against me? See, they're supposed to be fighting the British here, right? But there's a lot of infighting going on here. And it's all because I want to be in command. I want to be in charge. I want to be a leader over you. And these guys are inferior to me. But continue to listen. No, Benedict Arnold is my country, the country I love and want to serve my country. So he writes and he says, I leave this place, German Flats. Where's German Flats? Or modern day Mohawk, Herkimer, that whole town of German Flats is that area there. So it's not too far from here. He said, I leave this place this morning for Fort Schuyler, still besieged by a number equal to ours again. Nothing shall be omitted that can be done to raise. You will hear of me being victorious or no more. So either I'm going to win or I'm done. Very Benedict Arnold language. You will hear me victorious or no more. He's talking about the extremities of how he will die. He will put his life on the line once again, which he has done a few times since 1775, in an attempt to bring liberty to his country. I guess, again, I stress that his country he's talking about. And although he writes this letter to Horatio Gates, he countermands it that very day when he writes to Gates and says, well, actually things have changed, Horatio Gates. We've got reports from some of our friendly allies. Who are our friendly allies in that area? Well, what Haudenosaunee nation sided with the
Oneida.
Okay, the Oneidas. The Oneida Indian Nation, a friendly allies. At Fort Schuyler, their numbers are really more than ours, talking about the British, and we can't hope to best them in battle. So he's going to put the delay and try to relieve Fort Schuyler. Now, as for Fort Schuyler, the siege was lifted when British forces literally ran off in the midst of their siege, and they ran off for a good reason. There was a man named Yost Herkimer that the Oneidas trusted, and the Mohawks trusted, and the Seneca trusted, and the Onondagas trusted, and the Cayugas trusted. All the Haudenosaunee nations trusted this Yost Herkimer. He was a distant relative of General Nicholas Herkimer. And he was taken captive by the Patriots. And they were going to let him go if he did one thing for them. They were going to make it look like he escaped. They were going to make it look like he escaped the gallows. So they took his jacket off and they shot holes in it. Put it back, and I don't know what the holes, I don't know what that would have solved. You got holes in your jacket, but you don't have any holes in you. It didn't match. But they want to make it look like he tried to escape. And as he's escaping, they said, okay, you Oneidas, 3 Oneida Indians, you follow him. Make sure he gets to Fort Schuyler and tells the British what we're supposed to tell him. And what he was supposed to tell him was, Benedict Arnold's coming, and he's got thousands of troops, and he's going to wipe you out. You better get out of here. And they asked him, how many troops does he have? And they loved him. And he says, oh, as many as the leaves on these trees. So they're scared. They think, do we believe him? Like, yeah, we believe him. Well, they weren't coming. And Benedict Arnold loved the idea. Some people attribute him to coming up with the idea, but it was actually the Oneidas that thought of this. So so the British left. Benedict Arnold is on his way. Well, that scared off many of them, so the other half decides to leave. But it was all done by word of mouth that Benedict Arnold and all these men were coming. There was one that came up with the idea, and it was Colonel John Brooks. This is a guy here with the Oneidas. He came up with the idea. He was part of, I love this name, Colonel Michael Jackson's Massachusetts Regiment. Oh! Get it. He wore one glove when he fought. So, he had the idea. He loved the idea, and Benedict Arnold approved it, and they went through it, and it worked. This happened quite a few times during the Revolution, where, you tell, how are you going to know? You're going to chance 10,000 or 8,000 or 5,000 troops coming against 300? They're not going to chance it. They're going to leave. That happened in the Schoharie Valley quite a bit. Joseph Brant was going to attack where Cobleskill is in that area where the old stone fort is. He was going to attack, and he says, how many men do you have? Oh, that he took captive, and he asked, how many people are there? Oh, there's 2,000 or 3,000. It was only like 200. Grant says, forget it. I'm not going to take my chance. Go away there. And so it happens all the time with these. You didn't know what to believe. It could have been true, but who's going to chance it? So they marched triumphantly and arrived at Fort Schuyler on August 24th. So August 24th, right? End of August, 77. Now you know what happens in September, right? September 19th, big battle. Leading up to the Battle of Freeman's Farm at Saratoga. First battle. 2 battles at Saratoga, right? Battle of Freeman's Farm on September 19th. 3 weeks later, October 7th, the Battle of Bemis Heights. Benedict Arnold was key in both of those. Now, I did a couple of presentations on both of those, so I'm not going to go into huge detail about those battles. First battle, Benedict Arnold at the Battle of Freeman's Farm, he requested men to send to go out and attack the British. Gates gave him permission to take only his men, only Arnold's men could go. After he engaged all of his men, he went back to Horatio Gates and said, hey, give me a few more. Give me a few more. I could win it. Gates basically said, took out his sword and says, hey, I'm in command here. If you don't like it, I'm going to whack you. Basically, you're going to respect me as being the leader. Quit pressing me. So Arnold did. He couldn't do anything more. He couldn't go against what Gates was telling him. So that battle ended. British basically won that battle because they held the field. They held the field for 3 weeks. After 3 weeks of your army, the army's families, your doctors, your supplies, everything down by the Hudson River just sitting there, and that gets eaten up, right? So that's the problem. Now the British and the Hessians and the Brunswickers. See, now when I was a kid in school, you'd heard about the Germans fighting with America, right? And they were all called Hessians. The Hessians were synonymous with Germans. It's not true. Germany is like any other country, has counties, and there's different areas. And the Hessen-Hanau was where the Hessians came from. Braunschweig was where the Brunswickers came from, and they were a different type of fighters. The Brunswickers there, they had the long swords, the high boots. They were cavalry guys. They even brought their saddles over when they came getting to America, promised by the British that you're going to have horses when you get here. So they end up with these high hats, long swords, high boots, hot wool coats, no horses, and carrying their saddles. They dumped the saddles pretty quick when they realized there's no horses. Even you leaders aren't even on them. How are we going to? They realized it. But those were the Brunswickers, which were very important. At the cover of the book here, Don Troiani campaign, the Brunswickers are on the cover here. So these guys this is a picture of the Battle of Bennington. This is what they looked like. They had the little mustaches. And they were fierce fighters. But they're fighting alongside the British, alongside the Hessians, and they're running out of food. 3 weeks. So they send their men up to go look for food. We got to go farther north or farther south. They're coming from north, going south toward Albany, and they're going far south. They knew the English or the Patriots were still there, camped out at Bemis Heights. And if you've been to the Battle of Saratoga, the battlefield there, you know Bemis Heights starts, and it's a pretty good sized area. It's up on a hill, and it plateaus out. This is the reason that they knew when the British came down, they were going to have to come through Bemis Heights. Because if they'd have gone down by the river, which is much easier to get through, but the Patriots are up on here, and you know the high ground, little round top at Gettysburg, you want the high ground. You fire your cannons down on them, and they don't stand a chance. So the Hessians, the British, and the Brunswickers knew they had to come up and over Bemis Heights. Well, they get closer, and they're going looking for food and foraging. Well, you go a little closer, and all of a sudden maybe a shot rings out, and then the Patriots, ooh, what's going on? And they shot ring, and eventually it ensues into this battle, Second Battle of Saratoga. And it's not going good for the Patriots. And you're going to hear a lot of things. You look up documentaries, you look up books of what Benedict Arnold was given a timeout because him and Gates did not get along. Gates told him, go to your tent. Some people say, well, he went to his tent and he was drunk. He was in his tent just sobbing and, crud, my life is over. And he hears something outside his tent and he hears his troops are retreating. And he goes out and says, what's going on? Oh, really? He's, I don't think so. And he gets steals a horse, gets on a horse, rushes up to the British line. His men cheer him on. Arnold, let's go. Big Benedict Arnold. Cheer him on, go up and beat the British. Actually, there's tons of Brunswickers. There were hardly any British there behind Bremen's Redoubt. You can go there today. Bremen's Redoubt, German. And went behind the redoubt, shot him all. He gets shot, this time in the left ankle. Fall again, the horse on him. The horse shot, killed. Laying on the ground. The guy that shot him is sitting in there. So the men, Patriots men, Benedict Arnold men go to shoot him. He's like, no, don't let the man live. He's just doing his duty. That latter part happened, but this part of him being put in a tent, being pushed, getting drunk, it was not. 20 years ago, there was a letter found, and it's called the Bachelor Letter, Bacheller. This is a man, Bachelor, from New Hampshire, who is writing his wife. And now he's writing his wife on October 7th. Well, he wrote his wife October 9th, 2 days after the Second Battle of Saratoga. And he's writing, I am going to relay to you what I have seen and heard. He had just been sent, him and his unit, from New Hampshire to Bemis Heights. And he's going, when you go there, you don't just go, hey, let's fight here, let's go over here, let's put our tents here. You go to the commanding officer, who was Horatio Gates. Where do you want us? And as he's going up to Gates' tent to get permission to talk with him, he hears Benedict Arnold and Gates talking. And he hears Benedict Arnold, and there's a marker there. You see these markers that I don't have a picture, but anyway, you go and you see it's just an interpretive marker, and it talks about what happened here. Now, Saratoga's done a great job. They've done 3D pictures. They have like an actual musket, a three-quarter scale musket, and then a three-quarter scale rifle, what they look like, you can feel it and everything. And it says on this marker, now for years, Benedict Arnold's name wasn't even mentioned at Saratoga. But it says there, he says to Gates, give me some men, and we'll see what kind of fun we can have with them, speaking about the British, before the sun goes down tonight. Gates says, go for it, basically, in our terms. Do it. And that's when he takes his men. He goes up to Bremen's Redoubt. This part is correct, and you can go there today. You can see where the enemy lines were. There's stakes with red tops. That's the British line. They're like this. Arnold comes around with his men and breaches that redoubt. And everything then happens, he gets shot. The horse falls. That part is true. And some sources say he got shot in his thigh or his lower leg, but actually it was his ankle. I mean, his ankle's got your ankle has a lot of bones in it. So he's down. So then, long story short here, Battle of Bemis Heights is over. Second Battle of Saratoga. The British retreat north. There's people realize that, 2 days later they surrender or something. No, this went on for 10 days. They sieged the city of Schuylerville. There was a bombardment going back and forth with cannons for 10 days. Finally, Burgoyne and the British decide to surrender. And that's when you can go to Victory Woods, that area there where the surrender was signed. And then that battle is over. And then there was all kinds of repercussions. But Benedict Arnold never saw that. He wasn't there. And I always wonder, why wasn't Benedict Arnold there for the signing? How come he wasn't? He was on a bateau taken down to Albany, to the hospital in Albany. And there's a picture here of the bird's eye. I love this bird's eye view of the hospital. Well, I guess every map's a bird's eye view. But here, this is the hospital. This is the Hudson River. And there's a hospital on there. It was actually shaped like a large elongated H. And that's where Benedict Arnold was taken in October of 1777. So here we got General Gates again, or Arnold right into Gates. This is shortly after the first battle. He says, you, Gates, thought me of little consequence, because when Gates wrote his report of the first battle of Saratoga, he didn't mention Benedict Arnold's name once. And this is public knowledge. Public, it wasn't just written to one person, this is public. So Arnold writes him, he says, you, Gates, throw little consequence to the army, and I have the interest and safety of my country of heart. I wish to be where I could be the most service to them. I therefore, as General Lincoln has arrived, Benjamin Lincoln, request your pass to Philadelphia with my aide-de-camp and 3 servants, where I propose to join General Washington and may possibly have it in my power to serve my country. So basically, hey, you didn't give me any credit, even though I took all my men, basically whipped the British, the Germans, and I didn't even get my name mentioned once. I'm going to go down with at least Washington where I can serve him and be acknowledged and be able to serve my country. Gates writes him back on a day after that. Says, you wrote me nothing last night but what you had been sufficiently altercated between us in the evening. I then gave such answers to all your objections as I think were satisfactory. I know not what you mean by insult or injury. I made you such replies only as I conceived proper. Now, I'm no psychiatrist, but I know there's 2 personalities here. You have the emotional, right-brained Arnold. Tells it like it is. Doesn't, I tell him all the time, like, oh, you got to make your emotions known. You got to let out what you're feeling here. Come on, man. Stop bottling it up. Then you got the robotic Horatio Gates. Left brain. And they're not mixing well. They mixed well in 76, but in 77, they're not mixing well. And for the other people surrounding these 2 generals, they have some things to say as well. This one is by Richard Varick. And I have Richard Varick. And now, Richard Varick was George Washington's aide-de-camp and his secretary. This is Richard Varick up here. And he writes, I love this, he writes this to General Philip Schuyler. He says, I will sooner see him, Gate, downed and quartered. Down means shot. I'd rather see him downed and quartered than do anything for him out of my line. But Arnold I will cheerfully serve. And that was September 19th. That was the day of the Battle of Saratoga. Gates has his own friends too, though. One of them, James Wilkinson, who, if you know anything about James Wilkinson, no? Go to Saratoga, there's the Wilkinson Trail, which is named after him, which shouldn't be. James Wilkinson in the early 1820s wrote a biography about his exploits, especially at Saratoga. Benedict Arnold died in 1801. James Wilkinson, in his exploits, told what he did. And what he did was, for everything that Benedict Arnold did in the Battle of Saratoga, he inserted his name. I did this. I won this battle. And unfortunately for him, people knew about this, knew that was served under him. And his name is, I forget who said it. It was one of the presidents in the later 20th century here said he is, James Wilkinson is a crumb. But he writes to Arthur St. Clair, who's second under Gates, and he says, no long lost love here for Benedict Arnold. He says, General Gates despises a certain pompous little fellow as much as you can, and tells me confidently that nothing could give him so much satisfaction as your presence here. So he's hoping that St. Clair would come. Then Henry Livingston writes to Schuyler, he says, I am much distressed to Arnold's determination to retire from the army at this important crisis. His presence was never more necessary. He is the life and soul of the troops. Believe me, sir, to him and to him alone is the honor of our late victory. This is October 1st. This is before the second battle. He enjoys the confidence and affection of officers and soldiers. They would, to a man, follow him, conquer, or death. So this is Arnold here. Or this is Livingston writing to Schuyler. In the very last letter Arnold wrote to Horatio Gates. Now this is great. The last paragraph of the last letter. He wrote quite a few letters there. He didn't write any after the second battle because he was in the hospital, and Gates never apparently corresponded with him after he was wounded. But this is the last part of the letter he wrote. He says, I hope you will not impute this to a wish to command the army or outshine you, when I assure you it proceeds from my zeal for the cause of my country, in which I expect to rise or fall. So once again, here you have Arnold with his zeal for what country? My country. Now the bachelor letter I told you about is confirmed. It confirmed the historiography or the historicity of this event leading up to the 7th of October, the second battle. So on the 7th, the second battle, Arnold came to Gates with a plan, and he did this. Now, he gets shot in the left ankle, right? And there's a famous place there. It's called the Boot Monument. How many have been to Saratoga again? So you've seen the Boot Monument? Do you read the Boot Monument? I'll read it for you. It's very interesting. It says here, erected 1887. by John de Peyster, Brigadier Major General, State of New York. Second Saratoga Monument Association, in memory of the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army who was desperately wounded on this spot, the Sally Port of Burgoyne's Great Western Redoubt, 7th October 1877, winning for his countrymen the decisive battle of the American Revolution and for himself the rank of Major General. So there's no name, any name given to that, whoever that was, right? But we know it was Benedict Arnold. See, when they put that monument there in the 1880s, they did not mention him. When you go to Saratoga's Victory Woods, you'll see the Saratoga Monument. And there's 3 alcoves that have people in them, and a 4th one is empty. You have Horatio Gates in one, Philip Schuyler in one, Daniel Morgan in a 3rd, and then you go to the west side and you look and there's an empty spot, 6 foot tall. It's empty. Who's supposed to be there? Benedict Arnold. But they didn't want to put him there because they didn't feel that he should be, even though in 77 he was a great American hero. But unfortunately, what happens? Who is he talking about? Kids go and they read, who's this talking about? Look up there, who's the hole? Who's that supposed to be? Benedict Arnold. But now, like I say, there are monuments, markers around the battlefield that do mention him, talk about him. So the Boot Monument, we're not exactly sure where he got shot, but it's very close to where that is, or where that redoubt ends, where he came around. It was probably very close to where that monument is placed. Well, Arnold's got his left ankle cracked, a pretty good shot. So he gets put in a bateau, sent down to Albany. And he's not permitted to walk on that leg for a long time. Anybody ever broke their leg? I broke my leg. 6 weeks was a nightmare. Don't put any weight on it for 6 weeks. Now that 6 week got done, I put weight on it. It was right down near my ankle. It hurt. So he couldn't put weight on it for a long time. Arnold, again, though, in the hospital is not making friends. In fact, one of the most wonderful quotes that we have is from a surgeon of the North Department, Dr. I like this name too. We got Michael Jackson. Now we got James Brown. All right. He's writing this letter, the date of the 24th, Christmas Eve, December. So now we've gone through the whole year, Christmas Eve on the 77, to the Deputy Director General, that has the head of the medical office of the Northern Department, Dr. Jonathan Potts. And guess what his nickname was?
Potty.
That's right, Potty. That's what they call him. So Potty is his name. So when Brown wrote to Potty on this date, James Brown, was complaining about Benedict Arnold. Hey, what's his favorite song? Living in America, right? So, and he said to him, he abuses us for a set of ignorant pretenders and empirics. Empirics means like an experimenter or an ignorant person. So he's basically thinking we're a bunch of idiots here. Now this next one, he says, I give you this next quote because it gives a lot of laughs at what they, unfortunately, what the opinion of these surgeons, doctors, and people who are taking care of Benedict Arnold thought of him. He says, General Arnold, although incapable of service and only dictates hereon the account of his misfortune, has assumed the command issues, orders, and receives returns. So whatever he asks for, he gets. I don't think he would accept second command in heaven. John Wells wrote this February 20, 1778. So he's been in the hospital from October to February, and he's in the hospital for a couple more months after this. However, before the end of the year is up, Congress decided that they passed this resolution. Resolved that General Washington regulate the rank of Major General Arnold. Basically, Congress said, you decide what you want to do with him, and we don't want to have anything more. So they are giving authority for Washington to do whatever they want with him. They're kind of washing their hands of it and saying, you know what, General Washington, you need to take care of this. We don't want to be responsible. So this is when there's another one that looks similar to that, where he is actually given the rank of Brigadier General. Remember, this is November of 77, but he puts a date on it, February 17th, 1777, giving him 2 days seniority over these other 5 officers who were promoted back then, even though it's not posthumously, but later. So he's given 2 days seniority over them. You see what George Washington did? He did not promote him with that date of the 19th, he did the 17th. Because if you were to take Benedict Arnold, these other 4 or 5 guys, and throw them in a room here and say, okay, you're all promoted on the 19th, who's in charge? We're all equal. throw him in a room and say, who's in charge? And Benedict Arnold says, I am, because I was promoted on February 17th, 77, not 19th. So Washington, again, as I start out, Washington loved Benedict Arnold. Last page. Now we're coming to the end. George Washington writes Benedict Arnold while he's in the hospital to let him know about his promotion, saying, enclosed you will receive a commission by which you will find that you are restored to the rank you claim in the line of the army. I transmit by direction of Congress and a pursuance of the resolution of the 29th of November the situation of my papers, and the launch of like commissions prevented me from doing it before. May I venture to ask whether you are upon your legs again, and if you are not, may I flatter myself that you will be soon. There is no one who wishes more clearly for this event than I do, or who will receive the information with more pleasure. See, he's writing as almost like not a father, because they're about the same age. People think of George Washington being old all the time, but he was a younger, middle, thinking, man, nobody would get more pleasure at finding out you are healing, you are walking again, you are doing better, and that, I'm hoping you do. So he writes this letter to Albany, to Arnold, and it was some time, though, before Arnold writes back. March 12th, matter of fact. 3 months later, he's resting in Connecticut. He's out of the hospital, and he acknowledges the receipt of this letter. It is my most ardent wish. Now, this is the last one I'm reading, and I want you to notice a little change in Arnold's verbiage here, his vernacular, what he writes. He says, it's my most ardent wish to render every assistance in my power that your excellency may be unable to finish this arduous task you have with so much honor to yourself and advantage to your country, so long engaged in, and have pleasure of seeing peace and happiness restored to your country on the most. See what he's done there? For all these letters, it was my country, my country. Now he's writing George Washington saying, your country. He's changed his language. He put his country first. I'm a patriot and I'm a zeal for the cause in my country. Now it's become your country. But Benedict Arnold in the end got what he wanted, right? He got the rank of Major General, got seniority over these other guys. It was better what he could have hoped for. But this incapacitating wound prevented him from doing what he loved most, which was what? Sitting at a desk, right? Nope, he loved commanding and leading his men in battle on the field. He would never do it again for the Continental Army. So I'm going to leave you with 3 questions here. There's no written test. 3 questions. Was he satisfied? Would you have been? Then I left this as not a question, but I leave that for you to decide. Because we know what happens 3 years later. He does lead troops again for this flag. And he leads a army into actually Richmond, Virginia, and burns it down because he knows Thomas Jefferson wants to use it for his men and troops, and he burns Richmond. You know, Richmond was burned again in the Civil War, but this is the first time it was burned down by Benedict Arnold, leading men with a red coat this time. So he did lead troops again. So, that's it. The end. Benedict Arnold. 1 hour, right on the money. So you have questions? No, I let you decide. No questions. They're too tough. Not from him. I'll get back to you.
Must be a good reason for that.
What? Mike?
How about Arnold's love life? Was there a woman involved in being married?
Okay, his love life. He was married before. He had 2 children, 2 sons. His wife died. Then he met this other woman. Right? You're getting here somewhere with this. Peggy Shippen. She was 18 years old. I think he was 32. He was a bit older. He married her eventually. But there's been a lot of, there always was this, she was a loyalist. She had a lot of connections with Britain. So she introduced Benedict Arnold to a lot of different people who, part of the British upper. So there is possibility she was, not only she supported him, but she actually got him involved with turning, or he was thinking of turning and she went with him and he just had the opportunities because of her connections. But yeah, Peggy Shippen was her name, yes. Yes. He's laughing.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's it.
Is it true that he was never convicted of treason, but he did steal money? Was there something like that?
That was something he was accused of, and that's one of the things that kind of led to him. He was never convicted of it. It was something that he was accused of by actually, let me think of his name here. John Brown. Not James Brown. John, you've heard of John Brown, really? Not John Brown from the Civil War, obviously. John Brown up at the Battle of Stone Arabia. Right. Pittsfield, Mass. Yes. Came out to New York State here, and he had a lot of run-ins with John Brown did with Benedict Arnold early on, and they did not, once again, did not like each other. And he made a lot of accusations about him taking money and doing things at Ticonderoga he shouldn't have done. He ended up coming out, John Brown getting killed at the Battle of Stone Arabia, up in New York, up near Fort Plain. So no, he was never convicted. No.
Shipman's father, did he have some clout on the Tory side
Yes.
in New York City?
Yes. Well, Philadelphia, I think. Yeah. So that's what there's not a lot of correspondences that survived to know what, but she had a lot of, yes, because her father had a lot of access to big wigs, and then it became, is it because he wanted money, because he wanted a field command, because he'd had it with his country, that's why I'm not giving my reason. I have my ideas. There's a lot of infighting in the Continental Army. You think politics is bad today. Back then it was, I'm going to do it for what I want to do because I want to be in charge, or I want to get my agenda passed, or I want to get a promotion, or I want to get money. He, even in his letters, it's my country. I want to serve my country. I bled for my country. I got shot twice in the same leg for my country. I've gotten this. I've gone up to Canada, had frostbite and everything else for my country. And what do I get for it? These 5 crumbs who are young juniors get promoted above me after I've sacrificed. What have they done? Nothing. Pencil pushers. Because I'm from Connecticut. What's the problem? I should move to another state, and get promoted, which is what happened. Massachusetts did give him a command when he went to Ticonderoga and again clashed with Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen and him both get there. Ethan Allen had his Great Green Mountain Boys, which nothing against them, but if you knew the original name, they were called the Bennington Mob. Because prior to the Revolutionary War, there was this problem with Vermont. Of course, New York State thought they owned it. New Hampshire thought they owned it. And the king promised both of them, yeah, you both own it at different times. So New Hampshireites would build on it, and then they would have been New York come over and say, no, we got a letter that says it's New York State, you get off. Well, the Bennington Mob says, forget you, and they started kicking, and they hate New York at this point. Well, Ethan Allen and his brother Ira led the Green Mountain Boys, the Bennington Mob, but when he got to Ticonderoga on the way, Ethan Allen had all his men, Benedict Arnold didn't have any men. He got the backing and a piece of paper from Massachusetts saying, hey, you're in command with weapons. Where's my men? I don't have any men. Okay. We'll form an alliance. Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen, co-leaders of the Ticonderoga. Yeah, that worked real good. Benedict Arnold gets in after they take they're a bunch of old guys anyways and invalids. That's what that was holding the Ticonderoga. They weren't fighting men. Well, they get in there and Benedict Arnold says, now don't loot, don't steal, don't get drunk. And after they took it, what do you think Ethan Allen's Mountain Boys did? They got drunk for 3 days. Benedict Arnold said, we're here to win a war, not play around. And he went and said, forget it. He went and took some other forts in the area and left, took some men and went. But his men, Ethan Allen's men, would not listen to him. So, yeah, it was, why in the world? Yes, sir.
Did Washington and Arnold ever meet, and if so, where?
Oh, that's a good question.
Were they both at the siege of Boston, or he wasn't there?
No, Benedict Arnold wasn't there. I don't know if they ever met or not, to be honest with you. Good question.
He sent him north.
Yeah. What was I going to say, though, about him meeting? I don't know. A good question. We'll look that up. Come next time. I'll have an answer for you. Hey, I admit I'm not an expert. I did a presentation in Deposit years ago on the Civil War, and I was doing it on a certain topic. Just put the topic up. No, Scott Payne, Civil War expert. Yeah, great. Now you're opening me up for, hey, who was the commanding general at Petersburg in 65? I don't know. I'm not an expert. I have just enough knowledge to get myself into trouble. No. I have certain areas that I really delve into and know about, and as far as Benedict Arnold's life, I don't know every detail. I'm very interested, very interesting person. So.
I thought Arnold was the one that had the secrets for West Point, though, didn't he?
Well, because he was given command to West Point. That's right. Washington gave him command. That's what he did. He sold the plans to John Andre, Major Andre, poor Major Andre, 22 years old. Yep, they caught him. Where did they caught them near the Hudson River. They caught him in Tarrytown, New York. They arrested him. Actually, 3 guys arrested John Andre. And the spot is there. There's a marker there. One of the men, I can't think of his name either, was actually from the Schoharie Valley. Williams, I think his name is. And they arrested him and they took him over to cross the Hudson into a town called Tappan. You've heard of the Tappan Zee Bridge, not the Mario Cuomo Bridge. They don't call it that down there, they'll shoot you. It's the Tappan Zee Bridge still. Some people say we don't want that name, we want Tappan Zee, because that's you're honoring the Tappan Indians. And a Z is what? That's Dutch for an inlet in the river, a Z. So it's a Tappan Zee Bridge is where it was an inlet from honoring the two. So it's Tappan is really the name. There's a house there called the 76 House, built 76. I talked to the owner one time and he says, yeah, they said the new part was built in 1780, the newer part. 1780 is new. Yeah. And that's where he was hanged, right in Tappan there, John Andre. Benedict Arnold wasn't. Benedict Arnold went to England, got commissioned, came back over, and then fought, led troops against the Patriots. Yes. So he got to fight again, even with a crippled up leg. You know, you get shot twice. I mean, it's hard enough in today's world. 250 years ago, I'm surprised they didn't cut it off. But they did so many surgery. He writes in one letter, I didn't read that, he wrote in one letter, he said, there's just so many bones that keep coming out. The wound will not heal. Splintered ankle bones keep coming out, and then they got to take them out, and they can't close it up because it'll get infected. So they got to keep pulling out these little splinters of bones in his ankle. You know, your ankle and your wrist have the most bones in, you know. So yeah, he really, and I don't know how he got up on a horse to lead. You ever get up on a horse after you got shot in the leg? It's not easy. It's hard enough when you're old to get on a horse, put your leg in and swing up, but he. So I think it's a fitting that Mr. T's birthday was 2 days ago. B.A. Benedict Arnold, B.A. Mr. T. But Benedict Arnold says, I pity the fool.
How old was he when he died?
He was only 60. Yeah, young. Yep. Yes, sir.
One more James Brown for us.
One more James Brown?
Imitation.
Wow! Living in America. Hey, you want to see something funny, though? This has nothing to do with this, but you started it. Remember that show Amen that was on back in the 80s with Sherman Hemsley was on Jefferson? He does an impression on there singing that song. He sounds just like James Brown. And he moves like him and dances and everything. They're doing a talent show type figure to raise money. It's hilarious. So, see what I get when you guys come here?
You're a lot better. So.
That didn't take much. So anyway, any other questions? Wow. Okay. Well, we'll see you next time then. This is May, so July I'll be on a great topic, another controversial topic. By the way, Sullivan-Clinton expedition against the Haudenosaunee, right? Total devastation and destruction. George Washington's July 4th, I've been asked to be in the parade in Unadilla. They're opening a time capsule up there. Guess who I get to portray? George Washington. So there you go. There's another dynamic character. Do you either love him or you hate him? You stick with James Brown, blackface. You know, same type of thing with him. George Washington had his detractors, and he had. So, history's fun.
That's the day for the Unadilla thing.
That's on the 4th of July. It's actually on the 4th. Yeah, they buried it 50 years ago. The Rotary Club did it, and so yeah, they wanted me to participate. And I'm like, yeah, I don't mind. They're like, hey, how would you like to be George Washington? I said, you got to get me to make it look right. You got to get me a powder wig. And I got to have a blue sash. I said, if you get me a ride on a horse, I'll really be happy. But hey, I'll take what I can. I'll take a mule. But hey, so okay, so yeah, Sullivan-Clinton expedition. I forget the date, but it's in July here. And the thing on the door is wrong. It talks about the Battle of Stone Arabia and Clarksfield. That topic has changed. It's going to be on loyalties, consequences of loyalties, whether you chose to be on the Patriot side or the British side, what you suffered, especially in New York State here, by choosing one side to the other. So a little more local history. So, yep. So thank you again for coming and appreciate it. Thank you. One hour and 9 minutes. Hey, everybody, smile.
Yeah, one of the